Anybody else first?
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman. Just that, board, we need to keep in mind too that if we do not go into this agreement, then what? That could be sitting up there in our township, 70 acres for another 50 years. So ABB cannot go into DEP, but we can as a township and an entity that way.
Why can't they?
Well,
They can, but they would be spending their own money, whereas the township has the advantage of being eligible for various grants and so on that ABB can't leverage.
So they are in business, but they haven't done anything for 30 years, as he pointed out. So if we do not act, then that could conceivably be there for 50, 80 years. And that would be more of a concern for the school or for the young lady that lives nearby, because it wouldn't have been addressed, and that is a part of Cecil.
Well, Mr. Chief, we said though, part of the purchase price is that we would spend up to $450,000. So that would be our maximum purchase price if we were paying.
Correct. So 450,000, we could at least see if the DEP would approve it versus not doing the agreement and maybe just sitting there for another 50 years.
Eric, contamination's down low now. After 27 years, it's going to work now.
All right, go ahead.
The boring, you mentioned boring testing. Okay, so they're gonna drill a hole in the ground, suck up some dirt, and take it somewhere to get tested. Is that gonna be capped, the hole that they drill? Or is it whatever they sucked up, if there's poisonous gas, whatever, it's gonna throw all through Muse and then the school and?
Sir,
How long does
this
that
kind of
test take?
environmental testing occurs so regularly, so commonly, that if that kind of a risk existed, it wouldn't be happening. So
How long does the
the
test take?
hypothetical you're posing is unrealistic. That's all I can say.
I'm just using the worst case scenario.
Well,
How long does the test take, once they take the dirt out?
they take it to a lab. It depends on whether they spend extra money for expedited results or whether they just call for standard turnaround. Those are questions for the guys that work in the field and do the drilling and so on. I'm not one of those. I'm an attorney. Sorry.
Well,
I can't give you the details on that.
If they're gonna be drilling holes, they're gonna be disturbing all that.
Sir, if it were that risky, the people in the field wouldn't do the work. But there are people doing this kind of work in the field on contaminated sites across our country all the time. We've been doing it since the Superfund law came into effect in 1980. So.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I have one more question too for you. As Dan Desroth has said, they've already done some core testing up there already. Have those, before the board votes on this, have those results been given to the board so they know what's been done already up there? You would feel as if you've done testing already, it would give you some idea what the pollution is and what's going on. They haven't shown the results yet?
Yes, although frankly, I don't think very many lay people would read those reports with a great deal of insight. They're complicated. They're throwing around words of chemicals that are, 20 inches long. The bottom line is that the site has been assessed by many companies working for ABB and disclosing their information to the DEP for 20 to 30 years. All that information has been shared with us and with the township. It's been shared with our environmental consultant, who is building on that to develop his plan to get Act 2 clearance for the property.
Yes. Name for an address, please.
Michelle Stedmark, 42 North DeValley. The DEP doesn't exactly have the best track record with being open and honest about what they find. They've been known in the past to cover things up. How do we know that's not the case?
Oh, that's not going to be a fair thing to say. Yeah, that might be your opinion, but do you have a question for him that has some basis?
I'm about to ask a question right now.
Well, all right.
They have in the past actually not disclosed things. I'll phrase it that way.
Yeah,
So
nobody's
how,
going to agree with you on that.
okay. So how do we know that these old reports, these 20, 30-year-old reports, are everything's being disclosed in them? Like if we don't compare it comparatively to what they do now to what's there right now, before we get into all of this.
The reports are on file with DEP. They're publicly available under the right to know law. They've been furnished to us. They've been furnished to our engineer furnished to the environmental consultant. It's on retainer. There's no motive on ABB's part or on the township's part to hide anything about the contamination. Let me finish. Let me explain why. Because if you don't disclose it to the DEP, then you don't get the environmental liability protection. So you have every incentive to disclose everything and get a blessing for the whole property.
We have, wait, hold on, we have,
Wait a minute, you have the floor, go ahead.
I guess what I'm saying is that if 20 to 30 years ago, they were essentially self-governing, running their own tests and reporting them to the DEP. So how can you be sure that those tests were accurate then? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's, there, and excuse me for saying so, but, Mr. Cassiola has been, I have him in a transcript talking about how you can't trust the DEP. So I don't know how I'm supposed to take that into good faith today.
All of the environmental programs on which we rely depend upon voluntary disclosures by property owners, businesses, industries, and so on. Those voluntary disclosures are enforced by law. That is, if you fail to make required disclosures, or if you make disclosures that show that you're breaking the law, then you're subject to legal penalty. That's just how the system works. That's the assurance we have. It may not be perfect, but that's how the system works.
but you said something that I am serious with. You said there's no motive by ABB or the township to not turn something over, but I disagree with that. There's motive by ABB, and I'm not making an accusation, but it's to their benefit for us not to find something during the Act 2 process, because once the Act 2 process is complete, we are then, as a municipality, responsible for the cleanup of anything that's found out after.
No. Once again, after we take the deed, we have 12 years of indemnity from ABB. Now, as the gentleman in the back pointed out, an indemnity is only as strong as the corporation is giving it. But you have 12 years of indemnity after that, which would seem to me to be ample protection to the township, or I wouldn't be recommending the agreement.
Anybody else? Any different?
I do. Linda Boswell, 1921 Rising Road. I'm a little bit late to the party tonight, but is this the property in use
Yes.
where it used to glow and the parents would tell their children to stay away from it? And there are some people in their 50s and 60s that have had terrible cancer that lived in that area?
I don't know anything about all that, but the property is in use.
Can somebody,
2 kids died on the line.
yeah, like, what? It's getting a little scary, I'm sorry. That's not a question, I mean, a question is to where it was, but I think I now know where we're talking. It's like,
Would you like
is
to-
there nothing else available?
Would you like to see the property made safe and environmentally?
Well, but how about if you start to dig and something is released and the children get sick or die, God forbid, then who's going to be responsible for that?
If that
And it's
were
still
going-
a black eye on Cecil Township.
If that were going to happen, it would have happened by now, because there's been drilling and environmental investigation going on the property for the last 30 years.
You made a statement that it's advantageous for property owners to comply with the DEP. There are a lot of property owners who have not reported things that they should have reported. I'm just saying in general, not this specific person, place. And they don't care about the fines because they can pay the fines. And that's happened a lot in this southwestern Pennsylvania.
I think you're right, but I don't understand how that connects with this property. What we're going to do with this property is to investigate the contamination, remedy it to the extent it's necessary, get an Act 2 release, which is DEP certification that the site now meets Pennsylvania environmental laws, and therefore it's capable of being built on and developed down the road. That'll be a good thing for the people that live in the vicinity. To the extent these horror stories arise during the investigation of the property, then they'll be dealt with. And not necessarily just by the township, because if it's serious problems, the township only has to spend a certain amount of money. Anything above that to get the Act 2 release becomes ABB's responsibility.
Okay, can I just ask a question? When did all this negotiation start? I'm sorry for being late. Like, when did you start this?
I don't remember, it's been a year at least.
Okay.
So somebody in the back?
Yeah, Ray Zanny, 45 Zanny Lane, McDonald. I'm wondering why we're even talking about this, considering that you got a question of however much money this is that the township has agreed to pay for this property, which, if it's found dirty, ABB is going to pay that back to cover the cleanup. And once that's exhausted, we have federal funds to help with the rest of the cleanup. That versus not doing anything and the possible impact to the lives of the residents in use. Let's get this site cleaned up.
That's what the plan is.
So,
The way you describe the plan is exactly backwards of what would happen. ABB has no intention of doing anything with this land. DEP hasn't compelled them to do anything with this land. So if this agreement isn't signed, the land will stay the way it is.
and the
And
people
that's up to the
in use will
board.
continue to be impacted by dirty land.
That's
Let's
why-
get this done and get it cleaned up.
That's what the agreement does.
Let's do it.
Why would anybody in this room enter into a sales agreement when you don't know what you're buying? Why would anybody do that?
Because you have the opportunity to find out exactly what is there and take care of it before you take the deed.
And you also have the opportunity of them going bankrupt and the township getting stuck with the rest of the cleanup.
That's a possibility. I can't rule it out.
That's a big possibility.
All right, somebody else didn't have a chance yet? Anybody on the board have any questions or comments? And we're just gonna keep going around and around. I know I appreciate your efforts
Just
on it.
one more comment, that is, just what the lady pointed out from use, that that's very serious to hear people, that the ground glowed and different things like that. I really do believe that this needs addressed. I don't know if Ken and Mac knew about it before they built the school or anything, but I didn't hear those stories, or that someone died on the parcel or different things.
They didn't live around there, they just came there and they went up on the slave dump to get
But
money.
that should have all been investigated through Ken and Mac, or
What was glowing was the embers of the slave dump. And there were gases.
okay. But my point is just that I think we gotta get it fixed or looked into, or it could be a worse problem.
All right, one more since you're there. Looks like you're the last one. Go ahead.
I just wanted to know, is this the only option we have for a place to build our public works village?
The only option you have.
It's the only one, but there's nowhere else in town.
I think that's a matter of opinion. That would
Fit
be,
15 acres.
that would be
We
Mr.
need 15
Cecil's
acres.
opinion, not mine.
We already met with the redevelopment authority. They says that if we build that road for the school, we're hoping also that with the participation of the school district, we can have a road and not have to tear down the Hughes post office. In the meantime, the redevelopment authority, that's what they do. They said they'll help us if we want to build our buildings, what we need in our area, and then they'll work with us to develop the rest of the property as they did in South Point with the partnership with the partnership with the county. They said they would do a partnership with us and help us if we wanted to invest ourselves in the property. We don't know that we do, but we only need 15 acres for the public works, and they will not part with the clean 15 acres right off the bat. So it's either all or nothing.
You have to take all of that.
Yeah, that's the deal.
But our plan is to give another route maybe for the school, or another access or an exit.
All right, for resolution 143, 2017, is there a motion to sign that sales agreement for the purchase of the ABB property? Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second
It's been moved in second. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Carol, let the record show that the motion carries 3-2. Mr. Dizio, Mr. Fisher voted nay. For one.